Elections Committee, today being Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. Welcome, everybody. We have a full agenda today, so we'll move along as expeditiously as possible. I love to make sure that everybody we can has at least a couple minutes, and I mean a couple minutes at this time, to speak, but otherwise brevity is helpful. And just appearing and saying you support the bill or your organization does is also very welcome. So with that, I'll move Senate File 3808, the Omnibus Pensions Bill. Senator Rosen being the chief author. Senator Rosen, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. And yes, Senate File 3808 is the 2020 pension bill, and it is basically a technical and administrative change to our state pensions systems, but there are some notable pieces in it of work groups that have come together with the volunteer firefighters provisions that are extremely pleasing to see that we got these in there and that the work has been completed. We asked these folks back in 2018, the working groups, and we finally have agreement by all. And Madam Chair, I'm not sure if you would like me to go through this or Ms. Lincheski.
I think what you're speaking to right now is actually the A1 amendment, and I will move Senate File 3808, the A1 amendment, and I believe the A1 amendment is actually the language that you're going to be speaking to. So we have that amendment here before us now, and if you'd like Ms. Lincheski to quickly go through, that would be very good.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Lincheski.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Rosen. The A1 amendment is summarized in a summary that I hope you all have received from Stephanie James, Senate Counsel. I'll very quickly go through the articles. The first article, Article 1, State Board of Investment, makes some changes to the categories of investments they are able to invest in and will save administrative costs at the SBI. Article 2 addresses contributions being made by St. Paul City and St. Paul School District to multi-employer plans for employees of trades. These are construction and building trades. It permits those contributions while phasing out para participation for new hires. Article 3 relates to privatized facilities that have employees in para. If a current public employer sells off its operations to a private entity, the public employees leave public employment and are no longer in para. This has allowed for enhanced augmentation, which is an automatic increase in their benefits. That augmentation is being phased out under Article 3, along with all the other augmentation in our statutes that have been taken out in prior sessions. Article 4 is a cleanup provision. It substantially revises a section of our statutes relating to reporting to the state auditor, removing duplicate provisions and just really making it readable. Article 5 is the Minnesota State Retirement System administrative provisions. As described, they are administrative, technical, nothing substantive on those. They are listed in the summary if you want to see the details on that. The Public Employees Retirement Association administrative provisions are now contained in Article 6. Those are also administrative, technical in nature, cleanup to the statutes. Article 7 are administrative changes to the para statewide volunteer firefighter plan. This is a chapter in our statutes, and again, it's administrative change. These are administrative changes, clean up the statutes, changes the name, shortens the name of the plan. Article 8, administrative changes to the Teachers Retirement Association chapter. Again, also technical changes, nothing substantive there, but you can see the detail in the summary. Article 9 is a session law for one person, a former firefighter of the city of Maplewood who was not included in para for 7 months, the Para Police and Fire Plan. This allows for contributions that will then allow this individual to receive service credit for those 7 months. Article 10 We're starting in now on the Volunteer Firefighter Relief Association provisions. Article 10 authorizes the increase in the lump sum pension amount that reliefs are able to offer firefighters. So the current amount is $10,000 per year. Article 10 increases that maximum up to $15,000 per year, the benefit for firefighters in relief associations. Article 11 allows for, this again is relating to relief associations. This allows for the relief and a city, any city and any relief in the state to agree that they will share fire state aid. So currently under the law that is not permitted. All fire state aid must go to the relief association. Under Article 11, cities and their reliefs will be able to agree to share aid. And this allows for the transition of fire departments to more career and less volunteer firefighters. Article 12 deals with dissolution of relief associations. This is a product of one of the work groups that met. This work group dealt with how to deal with surplus assets in the event of a dissolution. This is a restatement of current law and substantially enlarges what the procedures are under the law for dissolving a relief, providing for full vesting, immediate distribution of assets, and then surplus. It addresses how that will be dealt with. It will allow for increases in benefits to eat up the surplus. Any surplus remaining must go back to the municipality if it has made required contributions in the past. And then after that, if there's any remaining surplus, the surplus is split 50-50 between the relief and the municipality. Article 13 relates to one particular relief, the Brooklyn Park Firefighters Relief Association. They are in the process of dissolving. This permits them to do that and to do a number of things that are not currently allowed under the statute, such as make immediate distribution of the accounts in the relief to these individuals, these firefighters. Article 14 relates to another relief association, the Ramsey Relief Association. This legislation is needed because Ramsey and Nowthen are in a joint powers agreement, but are in the process of terminating that agreement. That means that the accounts in the relief need to be split up. So the accounts relating to the Nowthen firefighters will be transferred to a new Nowthen Relief Association, still to be established, but this will allow that to happen so that the benefits will follow the firefighters. Article 15 relates to another issue taken on by the work group. This relates to conversions of relief associations from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans. Currently under the statutes, there are no procedures for that. So this adds new procedures that will allow that to happen. Defined contribution accounts, of course, are easier to administer, and there's no obligation on the part of the municipality when a relief has that kind of a plan rather than a defined benefit pension plan. Article 16, another volunteer firefighter piece of legislation. This is the recommended changes to the statutes that are coming from the state auditor's volunteer firefighter working group, a working group that's different than the one I've just been mentioning. This one meets continuously every year, and every year comes up with recommended changes. The changes are technical in nature. There's nothing substantive in those changes as well. The final article is Article 17. This deals with the Minnesota State Retirement System Unclassified Plan. This relates to a grandfather that was put in the law a few years ago to allow for the use of more generous factors in converting an account to an annuity. This ability to use these more generous factors expires at the end of June. And this article will allow that to continue for another year so that somebody who has already reached age 63 with 20 or 26 years of service will be able to retire, elect an annuity that will be more generous than it would be under current factors that are in use at MSRS. And that is the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Ms. Lancheski. Members, do you have any questions? Senator Howe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question relates to something that actually we worked on some time ago, but I was wondering if it got added into the bill anywhere. And that's where when a PRA member gets deployed overseas and they have a time limit to buy back that time, that contribution period, that service time, is there anything in this bill that extends that or eliminates that time period?
Ms. Lancheski.
Madam Chair, Senator Howe, that actually was expanded. That ability to do that and to remove those timeframes was put into the law last session. So that is in the law. There are a few changes to that make it more flexible and a little bit, the changes are attentive to some requests from constituents who have been wanting to use that allowance. So in the para-administrative part of the A1, there are a few changes to that, but that is now permitted and has been for, I believe, about a year now.
Senator Howe, does that answer your question?
I will take it offline with her to find out exactly what those changes were. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Howe. Any other members have a question? Okay, seeing none at this time, Senator Rosen renews her motion that Senate File 3808 as amended be recommended to pass and be put on general orders. To that motion, everybody unmute, please, and make sure your camera is on. Okay. All those in favor say aye and give a thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all those opposed? Motion prevails and is adopted. Senator Rosen, thank you. You're on your way to general orders.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members.
All right, our next item on the agenda is Senate File 4130. I will move Senate File 4130. Senator Utke, this is your bill. And I understand, do you wish to do your amendment at this time? I believe this is the first time, so this would be an author's amendment.
Actually, Madam Chair, this is its second stop. We were heard in Jobs Committee here a while back. So, and actually, it doesn't make any difference with me, but if we wanted to address the one issue in the bill first, we can, and then I'll go through the amendment.
I think that would be good, Senator Utke, that we take your bill itself, which is, okay, go ahead for your bill. So we'll save the amendment, members, for when Senator Utke has finished on the major bill that we're looking at here, Senate File 4130. Go ahead, Senator Utke.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and members. And I'll just quickly, Senate File 4130 is this year's Workers' Compensation Advisory Council bill. And like I mentioned earlier, it was heard previously in the Jobs and Economic Growth, Finance and Policy Committee. Today, we are looking at Section 13, which makes changes under the title of electronic reports filed under this section. And this whole section has to do with the new campus system at the Department of Labor and Industry for the workers' compensation. It's moving all the filings and reporting into an electronic system. And I know what's in here are just a few minor changes, but I did have a brief discussion with Chair Kiffmeyer, and you said actually, I think council had some recommendations that you wanted to see as far as tightening up, and it all has to do with the rulemaking for the commissioner related to this electronic filing.
Thank you, Senator Utke. That is the case, and you and I have discussed this before. Ms. James, if you could cover this language here.
Madam Chair, I don't suggest an amendment for this. The language that you often like to see added applies to a new grant of rulemaking authority. That's not what this is exactly. It's not authorizing them to conduct rulemaking. It's it's authorizing them to clean up their rules, to get rid of obsolete rules, and to amend rules when they're conflicting. So it's a different task. It's not a rulemaking project. And so I wasn't suggesting an amendment here.
Okay, all right. So then it's, thank you, Ms. James. I appreciate that. That satisfies me as well. Senator Utke, I think, and for the committee, because I think it was just a question we asked and Ms. James has answered it. So with that, Senator Utke, do you have other things to discuss on your bill at this time, or do you want to proceed to your amendment?
I can proceed to the amendment. The only thing I would just quickly mention, when you look at this section, and we're going to see it throughout that bill, there are references to, there are references to the August 31, 2020 date. And for those that might remember back on House File 4537 that we did in early April, we gave flexibility to that date just because of the COVID-19 circumstances that we're dealing with. So that's just a little technical thing, but that date is now flexible, and we've already passed and approved that. But at that, Madam Chair, I can go into the amendment if you'd like.
Thank you, Senator Utke. And again, this is the language on this part of the bill has come from the workers' compensation, and they voted unanimously on this language. I know you've been through a lot of work with stakeholders, so I suspect the rest of this committee is also familiar with how those things come about. So if you'd like to go to your amendments, Senator Utke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, the A2 amendment that's before you is a workers' compensation COVID-19 reimbursement amendment. And I refer back to House File 4537 that I did just mention. We passed on April 7th, 2020. And that bill was mandating workers' compensation to cover COVID-19 costs for workers in several presumptive eligibility classes, first responders, doctors, nurses, etc. While this provides protection for the workers, many of the entities that employ these workers are cash strapped at the moment. For example, local governments employ firefighters, police officers, and often EMTs. Hospitals employ doctors and nurses. Neither of these employers are doing well at this moment. We're particularly concerned about our local governments. They often don't have substantial reserves, and their only option for raising revenue is increasing property taxes or cutting services. The Department of Commerce and the Department of Labor and Industry coordinated on a rough modeling of the cost to the workers' compensation system for the presumptive class of workers. Those numbers ranged from 251 to 495 million for the year. A joint work group consisting of the League of Minnesota Cities, the Insurance Federation, the Hospital Association, and the Chamber of Commerce have crafted a state-based system to direct funding to employers with high costs from COVID. And then they're the self-insured local government entity, local government self-insured pool, or group self-insure with presumptive class workers and an annual premium less than 5 million would have an aggregate deductible of $100,000. That is, when one of these individual entities paid total COVID-related workers' compensation costs of $100,000 for claims arising from employees in one of the classes covered by the presumption, that entity would become eligible for reimbursement by the fund for any additional such costs. All other entities would have an aggregate deductible of $1 million. That is, when one of these other individual entities paid total COVID-related workers' compensation costs of $1 million for claims arising from employees in one of the classes covered by the presumption, that entity would become eligible for reimbursement by the fund for any additional such costs. The two-tiered deductible structure is designed to ensure that local governments and the smallest employers get more help, while the larger hospital systems are still supported at a somewhat lower level. The fund's obligation to pay would be reduced by the amount of any WCRA reinsurance or other third-party sources payment paid to the workers' compensation provider. Any claimant within the presumptive job class counts towards the deductible and is eligible for reimbursement. As laid out in the first paragraph of the bill, a workers' compensation COVID-19 reimbursement fund would be created in the state treasury to reimburse workers' compensation providers for COVID-19 workers' compensation costs paid with respect to employees in job classifications entitled to the presumptive established by 2020 Session Law, Chapter 72, Section 1, which again is House File 4537, which we passed earlier. This fund is to be managed by the Minnesota State Board of Investment. The amendment as drafted provides $375 million from the federal funds we've received to cover these costs for affected employers. Additionally, we're requiring reporting to the legislature on August 1st and November 1st. So if the claims experience is lower than expected, we can recapture some of the funding for other purposes. Since the federal funds are only available until December 30th, the estimated costs are reduced to $375 million in the amendment to correspond with the December 30th date. We believe the $375 million will be sufficient, but there is still substantial uncertainty in the modeling we've received. Members, that's the amendment.
Thank you very much, Senator Utke. And we will go to member questions. I see a hand raised by Senator Rust. If you'd please come on camera, Senator Rust.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Utke, I understand that, or tell me whether the Workers' Compensation Council not only supports your amendment, but your explanation of it.
Senator Utke.
Madam Chair and Senator Rest, this amendment has just come about, and it came from, there was a work group that I had mentioned earlier, the League of Minnesota Cities, Insurance Federation, Hospital Association, Chamber of Commerce. This has not been before the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council at this time. It's just coming together here in the last, well, it's less than 24 hours.
Madam Chair.
Senator Rust.
Thank you. I understand from the governor's office that the CARES dollars can only support public workers, public programs, and that your amendment would affect private insurers. And I realize, Madam Chair, that this is an author's amendment and it would go on generally without discussion, but I also want to call for a roll call on the vote and urge members to vote no. The CARES dollars will not cover the expenses of this amendment of this $370-some million. And I think it is premature. And Madam Chair and Senator Utke, it should have the approval of the Workers' Compensation Council. There were arguments made on the floor of the Senate in previous times dealing with, well, we can't possibly take any kind of an amendment that doesn't have
Senator
the authority and approval of the Workers' Compensation Council. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Rust, I will remind you that we are still in Senate rules in regards to the manner of our conversations here. So we do have a list of testifiers, and that would be, we'll go to Senator Dames first. Senator Dames, welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate it. In response to Senator Rest's information, when the original bill was put together that we passed off the House, and I don't have the file number right in front of me. I think it was House File 4537 that outlined the preemption and that stuff. That had been approved by the council, and the council at that time also was that group that worked with the council also was requesting that a funding mechanism be put together. So I was asked to be on the committee to put that funding mechanism together, and we did put the funding mechanism together, and that's what's brought this about today. But also, we have reason to believe that this is covered under CARES. There's going to be a disagreement on that, probably between the executive branch and the legislative branch, but we've had this looked at by different folks in the legislative branch that work with this stuff, and we fully feel that this will be eligible for coverage. And I think that one of the testifiers, Aaron Cocking, would like to respond to this. And thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I think you're muted, Madam Chair.
Senator, thank you, Senator Dames. We'll be going now to Mr. Cocking. Are you speaking, or are you and Mr. Johnson, or just you, Mr. Cocking?
Yes, Madam Chair. Aaron Cocking, Executive Vice President, Insurance Federation of Minnesota. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Federation today. I'm pleased, Madam Chair, that we've reached the point about talking about this amendment today and closing the loop on the commitment made last month when we passed the bill that Senator Utke referenced. Senator Utke did a great job of his walkthrough of this amendment. I want to touch on a few additional things. If you recall, when this pandemic first started, there was enormous concern from legislators, the administration, local officials, and others about the need to protect our first responders and frontline workers from the COVID-19 virus and the impact if it was contracted. To that end, we worked to pass a workers' compensation presumption bill that would offer coverage to these frontline workers. At the time the bill was passed, in the beginning of April, there was a consensus that the legislature needed to find a way to fund these additional claims. We were unable to reach an agreement on that funding before the presumption bill passed, in large part because of the uncertainty around the amount of money the state would receive from the Federal CARES Act. During the past 6 weeks or so, as Senator Utke alluded to, the Insurance Federation of Minnesota has been working with others to find a solution that funds this problem. And we believe that this bill does that. We have engaged with the League of Minnesota Cities, Minnesota Hospital Association, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, Minnesota Employers Work Comp Alliance, as well as others, to ensure broad agreement to this concept. I have also been told that the counties and school board associations are in agreement as well. Over the past month, we have had actuaries take the models created in March by the Department of Commerce and the Department of Labor and Industry and figure out what the losses to different entities and presumptive class employees would look like under those modeled scenarios. The March DOC DLI model suggested the low-end scenario would be a gross work comp loss of $191 million. Their mid-level scenario would be a gross loss of $320 million, and their high-end scenario to the work comp system would be a gross loss of $596 million. Under this bill, the high-end gross loss number of $596 million would mean that the fund would pay out roughly $597 million, while the remainder would be paid by other entities in the form of deductibles. In this scenario, the DOC DLI model suggests roughly 61,000 claims. The amendment before you today has two separate deductibles, which was included to recognize differing impacts to different groups. One is for local units of government and small self-insureds, and the other is for workers' compensation providers such as companies and larger self-insureds. The purpose was to make sure, as Senator Utke said, that local governments could get to the trough quicker. The most recent numbers that I have, which is through last Friday, show the number of workers' comp claims related to COVID-19 is 389. Of those, 1 is a firefighter, 7 are police officers, 38 are corrections officers, 121 nurses, 10 doctors, 101 what they define as healthcare ancillary positions, 22 home healthcare workers, and 82 are from other occupations. Senator Utke did a good job of highlighting kind of some of the features in the bill, so I won't go over that right now. I will say, though, that we believe that the CARES Act was intended to be used to help with the cost of fighting and managing this pandemic. And I can't think of a better use for that money than helping our frontline workers. To Senator Rest's question about the Work Comp Advisory Council, I would say that the Federation believes wholeheartedly in the work comp advisory committee process in the work that they do. I would say, though, that in general, the Work Comp Advisory Committee largely deals only with those issues that come under Chapter 176, the Work Comp Law. This bill, in our opinion, is purely a funding bill and has no bearing on work comp policy at all. Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody on the committee does have any.
Thank you, Mr. Cocking. I understand also from Senator Utke that the Workers' Compensation Council had a presumption that the funding would follow this policy. Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Cocking?
Yeah, that's our understanding, that when the presumption law passed in April, like I said, our understanding was that the funding was going to follow closely behind. We just couldn't get those wrapped together soon enough. And since we wanted to make clear that workers who contracted this were covered, we got that bill passed with the notion that the funding would follow behind that.
Thank you, Mr. Cocking.
Thank you.
We have another testifier at this time, Ms. Kate Berger, General Counsel with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. Ms. Berger, are you, I'm looking through the things here to see if I can find you. I think there you are, Ms. Berger. Welcome to the committee. Feel free to start your testimony.
Okay, thank you. I'm Kate Berger. I'm an attorney in the Office of General Counsel of the Department of Labor and Industry. My testimony was going to be about the rulemaking provisions of the Work Comp Advisory Council bill. And I believe that Senator Utke and Senate staff, Senate Council already spoke to those. And I'm not able to comment on this particular proposal, on the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Berger. Our next testifier is Dan Griesweg with the League of Minnesota Cities. Mr. Griesweg, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I'm so sorry.
Not at all, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I'm Dan Griesweg. I'm the administrator of the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, which is a joint powers self-insurance pool that provides workers' compensation to almost all of the cities in Minnesota, with the exception of 9 large self-insured ones. First of all, I want to thank the senators for the efforts you've made in extending additional protection to our public safety and healthcare personnel who are really on the front lines in dealing with the pandemic. Creating the presumption was an important step in that regard. And I want to offer a particular note of appreciation for the senators who have made finding a funding solution an important priority as a follow-up piece of legislation. Our concern from the beginning has really focused on how the potential costs would be spread. And that's a concern that's shared by many of our individual local government officials. I know that some of you have been contacted by your fellow elected officials from the cities, counties, and townships you represent to express those concerns. As Mr. Cocking explained, the bill you see before you is the result of discussions that included the county, the townships, the city, and the school board associations, as well as the pools that are associated with those associations. All of them, I can speak on their behalf, support this approach, support this legislation, are very appreciative of the Senate's consideration. The self-insured cities and counties, who we've also spoken with, also support this legislation, as does a coalition of smaller self-insurance groups that provide workers' compensation coverage to roughly 10,000 healthcare and long-term care facility employees throughout the state. In fact, for that matter, this approach is supported by every public, private, nonprofit, and labor stakeholder group that we've been able to identify and engage with the help of the Insurance Federation. Ultimately, we of course hope the pandemic never becomes so severe that we have to tap into these funds, and we dearly hope that they can be used for other purposes other than workers' compensation. That would be the best case for all kinds of reasons beyond the cost implications. If this pandemic does become so severe, however, that it reaches this level, it's really critical that we have a way to stabilize the workers' compensation system to ensure that affected employees have access to the financial protections they need and deserve. This bill will go a long way towards doing that. Again, thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'll certainly be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Greenswag. Appreciate your time and effort to be here today. The next testifier I have is Ms. Alicia Cowell from MMB. Ms. Cowell. Hi there. Welcome to the committee.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair, members. My name is Alicia Cowell. I'm an executive budget coordinator at Minnesota Management and Budget. And I would just like to speak to Section 2 of the amendment, that is the appropriation from the Coronavirus Relief Fund of the CARES Act. With the Federal Department of Treasury guidance and responses to the frequently asked questions that have been provided to date, it is clear to us that the increased workers' compensation costs to the government due to the COVID-19 public health emergency is eligible for payment from the Coronavirus Relief Fund. I think the guidance is unclear, however, on the use of the funds to pay for workers' compensation costs for private employers. Using the funds for this purpose would create a risk to the state in that the funds may need to be recouped if they are not spent on eligible costs. Absent clarification from the federal treasury on the eligibility of the fund to pay the private employers' workers' compensation costs due to COVID-19, it would be our advice that the funds not be used for that purpose.
Thank you, Ms. Cowell. Ms. Cowell, I have a question for you. So what you are saying is that all of those who pay into workmen's compensation, which is a mix of both private and public, can you just clarify that?
So when I say that the funds may be spent on public employees, it's the increased workers' comp claims that are a cost to the employer.
Thank you, Ms. Cowell. All right, so this is the list of testifiers that I have at this time. Is there anybody else on that would like to testify in regards to Senate File 4130 on workers' compensation? If you are, please speak up. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody if something happens differently. So members, I will move Senate File. I see somebody's hand up here. Is that you, Senator Jasinski?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would request a roll call vote and the results be printed in the journal.
Okay, thank you very much. Roll call requested as stated, roll call granted. I will move Senate File 4130
Madam Chair.
Ms. James.
Madam Chair, the committee has not adopted the A2 amendment yet.
Thank you very much, Ms. James. Thank you very much. Okay, I will move then the A2 amendment to Senate File 4130 as an author's amendment. All those in favor say aye. Be sure that you're unmuted and your screens are up first. Okay, all those in favor of the Senate File 4130 A2 amendment, please say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
Opposed. Okay. This is on the A2 amendment. Senator Jasinski, I'm understanding this correctly. Did you want the roll call on this A2 amendment or on the bill?
Chair.
I couldn't hear you, Senator Jasinski.
On the bill, Madam Chair.
On the bill, okay. With that, the motion passes and the A2 amendment is adopted. Okay, members, we now have the bill before us, Senate File 4130 as amended. Any other discussion? Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Ms. Cowell. We did have information that said that these monies are not applicable for other than public employees. And there was discussion that I've had in the background of the fact that if it was discovered that this was not an approvable use, that we would have to refund. Do we just have to refund, or is there a fine? Is there some kind of other cost? And approximately when might we have to refund money if it indeed is not advisable to use this for this purpose?
Ms. Cowell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Carlson, it's my understanding that, yes, the funds could be recouped by the federal government if it is determined they were not spent according to the federal Treasury guidance. When and how that would happen, I don't have the answer to that. And I don't know if there would be an audit that would have to take place first. I think these are some questions that we still have outstanding that we are also looking for answers to from the federal government.
Thank you, Ms. Cowell. Thank you, Senator Carlson. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none.
Madam Chair?
Senator Newman, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. To Senator Utke or Ms. James, on the A2 amendment beginning on line 3.6, there is some language in there that says the money in this appropriation can't be spent until it is determined that it's eligible. Does not that language take care of the concerns that we have heard, or am I misreading that?
You're misreading it.
Senator Rest, please go through the chair. Senator Newman, do you have a question? Otherwise, I would prefer Senator Newman, you go ahead and make your comments, and then if you want to ask a question of council.
Yes, my question to Ms. James was whether or not the language on line 3.6 of the A2 amendment, whether that takes care of the concerns as to how this money can be spent.
Ms. James?
Madam Chair and members, if Ms. Fontaine is on the call, on the Zoom, she may be better positioned to answer this question.
Ms. James, she is on the Zoom here. Ms. Fontaine will.
Yes.
You heard the question, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair and Senator Newman. The language in section 2 of the appropriation language was boilerplate language that I took from some other appropriation that was used in Senator Westrum's broadband telemedicine bill that just was kind of boilerplate to say that money couldn't be spent if it was found that it couldn't be used for those purposes. So it really wasn't meant to sort of cover this exact issue. And the way I read the language, it would be that if any funds under the bill would not be allowable, that no funds could be spent for the whole bill, perhaps. I do think, I don't know if I can do it on the fly right now. I think this has another stop somewhere, but if you would like it to be something more along the lines of if some money can be spent, that can be spent, but if other money can't be spent, then the appropriation can move forward. Maybe I could rephrase it that way, because it's clear, it seems to me from what MMB is saying, that the self-insured, the government self-insurance costs would be allowable, but that there's some question about the private insurers. So the language right now, I think might be might not allow any of it to be used.
Okay,
So,
well, Ms. Fontaine, would you please go ahead and do that language, and we'll see if we can apply this, clarify that. In the meantime, Senator Newman, would you like to continue? Ms. James, do you want to?
Madam Chair, members, while Carl was talking, I took a stab at an edit of the sentence, and maybe this accomplishes it. I'll do the edits after I read the finished sentence. Here's what I think the finished sentence could read. This begins on line 3.6. This appropriation may only be spent on uses determined by the Commissioner of Management and Budget to be eligible uses of the coronavirus relief account in the federal fund.
Madam Chair, I think that would work. What Ms. James is suggesting.
Senator Newman?
With the author's agreement, I would move the oral amendment.
Senator Utke, Senator Dames, would you like to weigh in on this? Senator Utke, you can go first.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy with that.
Senator Dames?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just took me a minute to get unmuted. I guess I would prefer to see the bill moved out as it is today, and then we'll do some research, and if there needs to be a correction made, we'll make the correction before we get to finance. And then we can make the correction there if that's okay.
Thank you, Senator Dames. I think that's perfectly appropriate. This bill does go to the Finance Committee, which would give us more time to give a little bit more thought, Ms. James and Ms. Fontaine, to this. Please mute yourself, members, if you're not speaking. Things come through quite a bit here. So we will do that. Let's, Senator Utke, I appreciate your willingness, Senator Newman as well. I think we'll leave this go to the Finance Committee and have a little bit more time to be more certain about the language than doing it here. Okay, Senator Utke, is that okay with you?
Yes, Madam Chair, that sounds good. I see you've got one hand up in the screen, but I'm fine with that.
I actually have a whole list of hands up here. I'm not quite sure if I've noticed on Zoom, once you put your hand up, it doesn't come down unless you put it down. So I have Senator Curran, Senator Jasinski, Senator Rest, did you want, I'll give you one last word here. We've heard you already. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm assuming that if the amendment suggested by Senate Council, and usually you like to have things taken care of within the committee before it moves on, but that amendment would protect the dollars of CARES to actually go to the people that it is meant to cover. That is public employees and the others that were covered in the bill that we previously adopted. And that it is not meant for private insurers. And I certainly hope that we will take that under advisement if you will not accept the amendment now as it moves on to finance. And you can have a fuller discussion there. I'm concerned that if the CARES dollars are going to be gone after, that they abide by Treasury's advice, and that the general fund is not under obligation to pay out for private insurers, which I understand from the governor's office that would be the case. So there is definite disagreement about how these dollars could be used and how and who would be obligated if Treasury said, no, you may not have now any of the $375 million because you did not follow the rules. So I just offer that caution. I'm still going to be a no vote here because we did not correct it, but I certainly hope it will be corrected in finance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rest. Senator Curran, is your hand up to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The question around the CARES Act, the funding mechanism. So again, the question for MMB, and we're talking about utilization, but it looks like Treasury guidelines state that this money can be used on private hospitals. So could MMB comment on that?
Ms. Cowell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and Senator. That's correct. There is another frequently asked question response from the Treasury that says that financial assistance, I'm paraphrasing here, but I believe it states that financial assistance may be provided to private hospitals, and that the financial assistance may take the form of a short-term loan or a grant. So I think this highlights some of the inconsistency that we see in the responses to the frequently asked questions, whereas the one response suggests that the workers' compensation increased costs are an eligible expense for government. On the other hand, it's clear that financial assistance can be provided to private hospitals. So I think this is where we're just a little uncomfortable because we see this inconsistency in some of those responses that absent some clarification from the federal government, we're not comfortable saying explicitly that workers' compensation for private insurers is eligible.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cowell. I certainly do understand it is not so clear-cut as what we would think, and I am reluctant to do this, but we are in the last week of session, and ordinarily that would be the case, Senator Rest, but because we are in the last few days of session, we're going to move it to finance, where we will give others time to do a little more research on this. With that, Senator Jasinski.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure that you've got my a request for roll call and also have the record of the vote be printed in the journal according to Rule 1210.
Okay, roll call requested, roll call granted as stated. Okay, members, we're ready for a vote. The clerk
Senator Kiffmeyer, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Rule 1210 requires a show of 3 hands in order to get that done. Can you just ask for that,
okay,
please?
Show of 3 hands.
You've got it. Thank you.
There being 3 hands, we will proceed with the roll call vote. The clerk will take the roll.
Madam Chair.
I don't know who's calling me.
Senator Lane, I have my hand up on this.
Okay, Senator Lane.
Just a quick comment that I just want to point out that I will be no, because if we make an error in this and we haven't changed it yet, then we put the general fund at risk.
Thank you, Senator Lane. And if we make an error, we will disallow people who would otherwise be qualified to get it. At any rate, members, we will proceed to a roll call vote. Ms. Wilson, will you call the roll?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Aye.
Senator Curran.
Aye.
Senator Carlson.
No.
Senator Swedzinski.
No.
Senator Howe.
Aye.
Senator Jasinski.
Aye.
Senator Lane.
No.
Senator Newman.
Aye.
Senator Rest.
No.
Senator Westrom.
Aye.
There being 6 ayes and 4 nays, the motion is adopted and the bill is passed. Senate File 4130 as amended. Thank you, members. With that, we'll proceed to our last bill on the agenda, Senate File 4519. Senator Osmic is the author. I will move Senate File 4519. Senator Osmic, go ahead and present your bill. And as I understand it, you have an amendment, and this would be an author's amendment. As such, I will move the A1 author's amendment. Those all in favor say aye. Oh,
aye.
Take yourself off your
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No. No.
Motion prevails and is adopted. Senator Osmic, to your file, to your bill, Senate File 4519 as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate File 4519 is a change to the declaration of peacetime emergency statute language that is currently being used by the governor of the state of Minnesota. Our framers of our Constitution here in the United States were wise in how they put together 3 co-equal branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The governor's office here in Minnesota has used a peacetime emergencies provision so far twice. And I was hoping that this bill would not need to be moved and not need to be executed. I did propose this bill on April 23rd, so this did not happen today. I would like to let let the committee know that I do now have four co-sponsors on, or co-authors on the bill, Senators Kiffmeyer, Westrom, Coran, and Jasinski. We, as the legislative branch, need to be a co-partner in dealing with the pandemic and its issues that we have found here in Minnesota. And I do not believe that we are co-partners. I believe that the executive branch has used the Peacetime Emergencies Act to freeze out the legislative process, the legislative branch. So members, to the bill, what this bill does in lines 2.20 through 1.20 through 1.25 is simply says that the governor can call a peacetime emergency as he can now for up to 30 days. After 30 days, as we all know, there are currently provisions in statute language that say that the two legislative bodies, the House and the Senate, can end the emergency orders by a simple majority vote. This bill changes it so that we actually, both of the legislative branches, actually have to take an action to authorize the extension for an additional up to 14 days of that Emergency Peacetime Act. The governor certainly can continue to request it, but that puts the power in the hands of a co-equal branch of government, us being the legislative branch. It also allows that there's an allowance here for lines 1.26 through 1.29 dealing with a special session. And there's additional language that follows regarding that peacetime extension. The second peacetime in lines 2.4 through 2.11, if a second peacetime emergency is to be envisioned, there's additional language that describes exactly what can continue to happen and what happens if 30 days expires. Again, members, I didn't want to bring this forward. I did not want to have this have to be heard at this point of our legislative session. However, it has become painfully clear that the governor is going to extend his emergency powers this afternoon or this evening for another up to 30 days. The emergency we are existing in today, the primary purpose of the declaration and all the activities that have primarily taken place is to prepare our health system so that it does not become overwhelmed. That has already taken place. We have already prepared. Now we need to return, members, to a co-equal branch and co-equal powers to continue to serve the residents of Minnesota. This is not to be, we separated ourselves from King George III, and I'm not saying that Governor Walz is a king, but I am saying that we as a legislative body must have our power and our authority, and we are not just another rubber stamp for whatever the governors or the executive branch wants to do. So I hope, members, that you will approve this bill. I think it was originally proposed hoping that we wouldn't have to take action on it, but it has become obvious it's time for us to act as the legislative branch, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator Osmic. I see two hands raised here, Senator Coran and Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on the vote, so I request a roll call vote, and I request that the record of the vote be printed in the journal under Rule 1210.
I need a show of three hands. So moved and accepted. There will be a roll call vote as stated. Senator Westrom.
Madam Chair, Senator Osmic, I'm wondering if you or if council could give us just a brief history on when this statute was passed. I tend to recall it being passed or modified about 10 or 15 years ago. Is that the last change we made to it? And I guess my follow-up question is the contemplation about having both bodies having to decide in order to discontinue an emergency as opposed to your legislation which I've signed on to, that would rather have the legislative branch be a co-equal or a more active branch. But any history our Senate Council could give us on when it passed and the discussion of this section, I'd be interested for us to revisit a little.
Okay, Ms. James.
Madam Chair and members, Senator Westrom is right that it was last amended actually about 15 years ago. It was passed originally in 1951. It's been amended over the years several times to address different sorts of events, but most recently in 2005.
And in 2005, Ms. James, what was the change?
Well, Madam Chair, that will take a little bit more careful. I will do that and
Madam Chair,
get back to you.
follow up.
Just a minute, Senator Westrom. Thank you, Ms. James. I think it'd be good if we could get a little bit more of that. Somebody is unmuted and making quite a bit of noise here. So, all right, Senator Westrom, go ahead.
Madam Chair and Ms. James, while you're looking that up, in 1951, I would be interested to know a little bit more about what changed, but I'm not wanting to put you on the spot. But a chronology of some of the changes since 1951 would be of interest. That's a bigger question than what Senator Kiffmeyer just asked. What was it in 2005 that we changed, which I'd be interested in as well. But what was the alternative prior to 1951 when the legislature first passed this? Do you know that?
Senator Westrom, I think we're going to give Ms. James time to get some of that information. Ms. James, if you know the answer, please go ahead.
Madam Chair and members, I don't know what the alternative was before this passed in 1951.
Okay. And Madam Chair?
Senator Westrom.
That's fine. If we could get that information supplemental, if we can't get it before we go to a vote, but I'll just speak on the bill briefly. Madam Chair, I think the author has made very good points. One can't look at the process right now and say with a straight face that the legislature hasn't been froze out of many decisions that I don't believe were ever intended to be made by just one branch of government. 30 days is plenty of time for a governor and the legislature to get together. We have shown many times, even since mid-March, that the legislature can come together, react with budget bills, react with policy changes, and that's how the process should work. But it shouldn't be a la carte for one branch of government to pick and choose when they want to involve the second branch of government. That's a co-equal branch, us and the legislature. So I think this is a very practical and a much needed change given the conduct and what we've seen happen in these past 2 months. I think it's very ripe for change, and I think the public is seeing the errors of what this statute is allowing our governor to do.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Any further discussion on the Senate File 4519 as amended?
Madam Chair.
Ms. James, yes.
I can offer a little bit of answer to Senator Westrom's question about what changed in 1951 or what changed in 2005. In 2005, this section of statute provided for the governor to be able to extend the peacetime emergency while the legislature was sitting in session. But if the legislature was not in session, then the governor had to call a special session. So the change was to get to the current law, which provides for the legislature to be able to terminate an emergency that extended beyond 30 days.
Thank you, Ms. James. I appreciate that additional information. And Senator Westrom, you may have more questions.
Okay. Go ahead, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. James gave you an answer a little bit. Do you?
I did have a further question, but I thought you were going to say something first.
Well, we'll gather your question, Senator Westrom, so the rest of the committee can hear, but I don't know that Ms. James should be put on spot too much to give answers when she's not ready. So Senator
Madam
Westrom,
Chair,
go ahead.
in no way am I trying to do that, Ms. James.
I know.
So please do not take that. I realize this wasn't in the forefront of recent studied statutes, but Madam Chair, what Ms. James just answered, Ms. James, so the change in 05 did affect the part about the legislature and being able to cancel the state of emergency or call us back, or could you explain that a little bit more? I wasn't sure. It almost sounds like the change in 05 might have gotten to some of the issue today, and I'm interested if it was that recent of a change that's left us in this state of affairs.
Ms. James?
Madam Chair and members, yes, the change in 2005 addressed this bill for the legislature to play in this situation. And yes, we moved from a situation where the governor was allowed to call emergencies while the legislature was sitting in session. And then the old law didn't specify that the legislature had an opportunity to take action. And so the new law specifies that when the legislature has this opportunity to terminate a peacetime emergency explicitly. It's possible that under the old law, one would have interpreted it to allow the legislative action in a way, but it just wasn't explicit in the old law, and so the new law made the legislature's role explicit.
Very
Thank you,
good.
Ms.
Thank you.
James.
Thank you, Ms. James.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Any other members? Discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any at this time.
Madam Chair,
Who is that?
Senator Jasinski.
Oh, Senator Jasinski, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to comment on the bill. I think this is a great bill. I want to thank Senator Osment for bringing it forward. When I was the mayor of Faribault, I called emergency powers twice for 2 different floods. And once we called those powers, we had full interaction with the full council in any decision going farther from that point. We all felt we had input. And at this point, what I've seen in the last period of this state of emergency, I, as a legislator who have an election certificate, don't believe that we've had the input that we should have. My residents and people in my district are asking, why can't you get more input and why aren't you involved? And I feel like we've been strangled without having our opinions involved. And I think this bill is something that should be done to carry on further after this, so this does not happen again. I think that if it were reversed to other parties and they would feel the same. I know Minnesota is different. We're the only divided government in the nation, but I really think this is a great bill that would definitely keep us as the Senate involved, and not just one party, not just one body that's involved in some major decisions that affect the entire state of different philosophies, different beliefs, all being made by one body of government, one party of government. And I think this is something that would really be valuable in the future from what we've learned during this event. And I hope to God I never do it again, or never have to do it again. But this is something that would definitely put more checks and balances into the way we operate in the state of Minnesota. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Jasinski. I have 2 other hands, Senator Carlson and Senator Lane. Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I can't let this go without saying that we have a situation here where we're involved in a very, very serious crisis. And what we don't need to do is add politics to it. And that's obviously what has been happening. I think you've all gotten the emails that I've gotten, and they're from people who just have a partisan political agenda that want to gather opinions against the governor. And they have not done their research. They have not listened to the national experts. The national experts are are saying exactly what the governor is saying. The national epidemiologists are all behind what the governor is doing. The governor is opening up businesses. I have had very good response from the people that I have contacted about different businesses that put together their plans and are now open. And I think this, what we need to do is we need to do things that are really getting to getting this solved and not just building political posturing, which, I mean, I think everyone knows that this is a dead bill. It's never been heard in the House, and it would never be signed by the governor, and we would never be able to override his veto. So I think that we need to make sure that we keep our eyes focused on what this crisis is like, and we need to all pay attention to the advice that's coming from the national experts and the state experts and deal with it in a disciplined manner. So I have to say that. I have to say that this is really, to me, it's a big waste of time to even discuss it.
Senator Carlson, this is the Senate, and I think you are not implying that we should only hear bills that the governor or the House approves of, that we as a Senate cannot act independently, but that we always have to think, well, will the governor or will the House approve of this? And then we can proceed on a bill. Then we can discuss a bill. We have to have the permission of the governor and the House. I don't think that's what you're saying here. Are you, Senator Carlson?
Well, Madam Chair, I guess to answer that, I would have to say, maybe what we shouldn't have done was put it onto the agenda this morning and gotten some of the governor's stakeholders involved in it and have them testify as well. Bringing it up at the last minute, that's not a good way to pass bills, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, if you're talking about what we hear and what we don't hear, you have not heard any bills from me. And and that's something that you can go and see in the record, that you won't even hear bills from the other side of the aisle. So I guess when you bring that up, I'm going to have to respond that way, that you have decided what bills are going to be heard and what bills are not. And you have decided too many bills, in my view, that you're going to kill. And this is one that we know is not going to have a future. And I think you should have one of the stakeholders from the governor's office to give the opinion of it, maybe even have some of the epidemiologists testify on what is and what isn't the right kind of instructions for us to follow to get over this crisis. This is a crisis that is nonpartisan. And I think you have seen how partisan it has gotten. It has come up on the Senate floor. It has come up everywhere. And I really can't see the reason for trying to make it so partisan.
All right, Senator Carlson, next time I'll check in with you. Let's see, the next person on the agenda here I had announced is Senator Lane, Senator Newman, Senator Kwasniewski, Senator Coran. We'll go to Senator Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to point out that we have the authority to terminate, the legislature has the authority to terminate an emergency if we are in agreement. If the legislature is in agreement, we have that power. It is not a matter of trying to get the executive to be in agreement with us. We need to be in agreement, and then we have the power. And the governor has reached out many times wanting to collaborate every step of the way. When it's not possible, then that leaves him no choice. We are in a national state of emergency. It isn't just a local state of emergency, it is a national state of emergency, and that's the situation at hand, an emergency. And this is the way we can deal quickly and easily and flexibly with an emergency. And we set this up in our statutes. And as I say, we have the ability to terminate it if we as a legislature agree. But to not have agreement in the legislature does not change the fact that it is an emergency. If we had a rogue governor, we could terminate it in agreement in the legislature, period. But to do it any other way here is to just bring politics into something that is an emergency. We have the safeties built into this. We can terminate. If we are in agreement, if there's a problem, we can do it already. We do not need to step into the middle of an emergency and make it full of politics.
Thank you, Senator Lane. To the bill members, again, this is a policy decision of the legislature agreeing the direction to go, whether to vote to, by each body, to end the peacetime emergency or a vote to continue it. It's just a process question, which is certainly properly before the legislature. And I next have Senator Newman and then Senator Kwadzinski. Senator Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do want to respond, Madam Chair and members, to the allegation that the only reason this has come forward is because of a partisan political agenda. I really do strongly dispute that allegation. In point of fact, the bill that we heard on the Senate floor 2 days ago was a bill that I drafted. And that was a bill in which I proposed that we work with the governor, have him tell us what his safety directives are in terms of returning or allowing businesses to return to work. And so long as a business is able to comply with what the directives of the governor directs, that then our businesses should be allowed to go back to work. That bill, it was a direct result of emails that I have been receiving from my constituents in rural Minnesota who have no political agenda. They are businesses whose livelihoods have absolutely been ruined. And I was searching for a way to work with the governor in order to allow my constituents to go back to work and earn a living. Had nothing whatsoever to do with politics, no matter how you shape the argument. And that bill was met with such organized opposition that I was just stunned, because all I was trying to do with that bill was represent my constituents are begging me, literally begging me to do something to allow them to go back to work because they are facing financial ruin. And that bill became very political on the floor, and I really think it's a shame that it did, because that's not at all what I had in mind. All I had in mind was, Governor, you tell us what the rules are. We will comply with those rules. Let us go back to work. Had nothing whatsoever to do with politics. And this bill today that Governor or Senator Osmek has brought forth is simply trying to address some of the problems. And I'll tell you, my personal opinion is that this peacetime emergency statute that we are operating under has some fatal flaws in it. I cannot imagine a situation where a governor has the right to, in effect, enact a law that makes it a gross misdemeanor if somebody violates his order. There's nothing in this emergency statute that gives him that authority. It says he has the authority to cause it to be a misdemeanor, but there's nothing in there about it being a gross misdemeanor. He has far exceeded his authority there. And these people that want to go back to work simply because they are facing this financial ruin that I'm talking about, gee, I really can't blame them. They are so desperate. And I just truly do not get the feeling that Governor Walz has been able to work with us in the Senate to any great extent. So I really do dispute the allegation that this is all about partisan politics. What this is all about is trying to protect our constituents. And my constituents are screaming bloody murder for help. And I just don't see the governor listening to them. And so all I'm trying to do is help them. So, I apologize if I'm coming across insensitive, but this isn't politics. This is an emergency, and we have people that are suffering as a result. And it's up to us to find a way out of this mess. And I will work with you collectively, but you have to help us, because I sincerely do not believe Governor Walz is listening to us. I just don't get that feeling at all. And my constituents, just based on the emails, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of them, from just Meeker and McLeod County, business people. I cannot tell you how frustrated and frightened those people are. Madam Chair, I apologize if I have ranted and vented. I didn't mean to. This is just so difficult of a situation to handle without us pointing fingers at one another. So thank you, members, for listening.
Thank you, Senator Newman. Speaking on behalf of your constituents is a duty and a responsibility and a privilege that you have, and as we have allowed others on this committee, so we will continue in speaking in that regard. Senator Kwudzinski, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the earlier discussion on separation of powers and checks and balances. And when the framers did create the Constitution, they did, in fact, create co-equal branches of government, but they did provide for measures on extraordinary occasions that the chief executive would act alone in doing things that just the House and the Senate would take too long to get accomplished. And the Republican president, Abe Lincoln, was one of the most egregious examples of taking advantage of that clause in the Constitution when he did, in fact, exercise all the extraordinary measures he took during the Civil War. And 50 years later, when the Democratic president, FDR, invoked emergency orders under World War II and resettled 110,000 Japanese Americans under the emergency measures. These things do in fact happen when we are in times of crisis like we are right now. And so I'll be voting no on this bill and for that very reason. And then lastly, I don't know if this is the answer to the question that came up earlier, but I do know in 1951 or 52, President Truman was so worried about labor and the strikes that labor were imposing upon the steel industry. He sent in the National Guard and termed it under his powers as a chief executive. And I'm not sure if that's why the state of Minnesota passed that legislation at that time period, but those two events occurred pretty close to one another. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kwudzinski. I appreciate your history there. That's always very helpful. I think the issue more here is the length of time, not the executive having the initial ability to have emergency powers. I think that is well recognized. I think from my constituents, they say, how long can this go? 30 days, another 30 days, can this go? And the governor is talking about 18 months. And they are frightened, they are fearful that this becomes more like a dictatorship rather than a republic form of government where you have the balance of powers. So I think that's part of this here right now is the policy of whether the vote is to continue or to end. And also the question that our citizens ask is how long can this go on? I don't know that, quote, emergency meant continuing and going on. So I have Senator Ann Rest and then Senator Mark Curran, and then we will proceed to a vote, members. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't often speak of this, but who I hear from and who my tears are for are not only the businesses that are experiencing more than just inconvenience, but for the 100 families, 100 families in my suburb of New Hope, 20,000 people who've experienced the death of someone from COVID-19. I don't consider that a partisan response either, Senator Newman. In my concern for my constituents, my businesses, and the families of those who have died.
Thank you, Senator Rest, as I believe all of us do. All of us care deeply about every single one of them. And so I think I want to reflect that every single member here has spoken several times, maybe not this exact day on this exact particular situation, but Senator Rest, I have compassion for you in particular in your district. I think you are very, very close to it. I appreciate that, but not all are like your district, and we care for your business folks and we care for all those people who are hurting without
I've got the
question.
best district in the state.
Thank you very much, Senator Rest. Thank you very much. And so we next have Senator Curran, and that'll be our last before a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Newman did a great job in addressing the reason for bringing this issue to the floor, and as well as we're bringing it forward here. And he apologized, but he did it much more eloquently than I probably ever will. I won't apologize for fighting for our constituents and Senator Carlson's desire to make sure that all the stakeholders have input and communication. To claim that this is not all about politics, everything we do is about politics. And from the movement of the governor's decisions, he originally stated, and I think everybody agrees, we had to figure out what this issue was. Took the emergency orders to prepare our hospitals. The moving goalposts have put all of our businesses in a Sophie's choice, right? I can either violate an order, some random order that doesn't have any common sense or certainly doesn't have logic and science embedded within it, or I can guarantee financial ruin. And people, I think most people, because I think the statistics we talked about, 91% are supposedly able to open. That's just not reality, and it's not hitting Main Street anywhere in Minnesota, because the burdens are so great that are imposed in the micromanagement and arbitrary application of these rules are just unfair. So we're dealing with everyone's livelihoods, and we absolutely can open up safely. That's what this is about. Menards and Walmart didn't get special dispensation and were not ordered to have special practices put in place in order to keep them open. They migrated to good, safe business practices, which every single person in this state can do. And it's not government's job to try and dictate and manage micromanagement policies, which would affect an individual business. They know their business better than anybody else, and I won't apologize for that ever. We also have, the Senator Rest did a great job at talking about the tragedy that is our nursing homes. We're the highest in the nation. That is completely unacceptable, and every single one of us have fought extremely hard to make sure that that's taken care of. Even today, we have no chance to provide input, feedback, or even understand what the plan is to address that issue. As I look at it, it's pretty simple. With logic and science, I would say that at least 80% of our resources should be going to take care of our elderly people and those in convalescent facilities, and make sure that we do everything and take extraordinary efforts to make sure that they're taken care of in the most compassionate way. And that's not happening. And so our citizens they can no longer believe what's coming out of the governor's mouth about you have hope. They have no hope when there's no defined plan, and then it's arbitrary in the application of what's in place today. Again, I love the candy store down in Jordan, but because of personal meeting, and I think Senator Carlson even referenced, those that submitted a plan to the governor were able to open. Well, how the heck does somebody get that plan? That's not well known, certainly isn't sought. And we weren't provided policies and procedures and how one of our businesses could apply for that. And so that's why we're here. And I think this is a great bill, and our rest of Minnesota absolutely demands it. So I'll be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Curran. We will go to closing remarks to Senator Osmek, and then we will proceed to a vote.
Senator,
Senator Carlson, Senator Osmek is doing closing remarks. Senator Carlson.
Madam Chair, my name was mentioned. I do deserve a response there. Senator Corn said, where do we get it? Go to the governor's website. That's where the plan can be found. I've done that for several businesses in my district. All you have to do is pay attention. Go to the website. There's where you can get the plan.
Thank you, Senator Carlson. We'll be sure to make use of that. Senator Osmek for closing comments.
Thank you, members, for the discussion. This has not been brought forward and you may not believe me, but I will say it. This has not been brought forward out of any partisan political agenda. This is simply protecting the rights, not of today necessarily, but protecting the rights of the legislative branch to have an active voice when it comes to emergency powers. These emergency powers that the governor of Minnesota has taken have impacted constitutional rights of citizens. That cannot be overemphasized. Our Constitution of the United States and the state of Minnesota has very explicit rights and has very explicit guidelines for what the government can and cannot do. And sometimes I'm asked, and I know Senator Swedzinski, you used to be a teacher of these things, I will ask candidates, what is your favorite amendment out of the first 10 out of the Bill of Rights? And I wait to see what the answer is. Some of them say First Amendment, some of them say Second Amendment. And very rarely, but I do find once in a while, somebody says the 10th Amendment. And I ask them why, because they're right. Because as Senator Swedzinski, and I don't want to provoke comment from you, but the 10th Amendment says whatever, to paraphrase it, whatever's not in the Constitution is reserved to the states and to the people. And when the governor has taken emergency action that has impeded commerce, that has impeded your constitutional rights, there needs to be a higher standard. These emergency rights, rightfully so, can be exercised. But at what point do they become abused? How long is short-term versus long-term? This has nothing to do with epidemiologists or physicians. This has to do with how does the government of the state of Minnesota act after a certain point in an emergency? And where does that end? And where do we get back to co-equal branches? Because right now, as Senator Newman said, by the way, Senator Newman, God help us, Senator, that Senator Osmek is Governor Osmek. I love those words. But at what point do we move out of the emergency into the co-equal branches that we are? I would be doing, and I swear on a Bible right now, if this was a Republican governor doing what he's going to do today, which is a third extension, I would be saying the same thing, because this is not about partisan politics. This is about what we have been elected to do. We are elected not only to serve the people as state senators, but we are also elected to put in place a form of government which is representative of the people. And those emergency powers are impeding those constitutional rights that we protect, I protect, on a daily basis. So, members, I appreciate the time. I would appreciate a yes vote on this. And I thank Madam Chairman for hearing this bill today.
Thank you, Senator Osmek. With that, members, will proceed to a vote as previously requested. And according to Rule 12.10. So, Ms. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Aye.
Senator Curran.
Aye.
Senator Carlson.
No.
Senator Swedzinski. Senator Howe.
Aye.
Senator Jasinski.
Aye.
Senator Lane.
No.
Senator Newman.
Aye.
Senator Rest.
No.
Senator Westrom.
Yes.
Senator Swedzinski.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Sorry,
Just a
no.
moment, we're voting. Senator Kwedzinski.
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Senator, just a moment, Senator Westrom. We're in the
Withdrawn.
middle of voting, but do you have a question in regards to voting, Senator
Do not.
Westrom?
Not anymore. Nope.
Okay, all right. There being 6 ayes and 4 noes, the bill is adopted. Senate File 4130 as amended and referred to general orders. Thank you very much, members. I know this is a very challenging time and we all have a lot of
Senator
feelings and other things that we are doing at this time. So I really appreciate that we have had a very robust discussion. I heard a voice, not sure who it is.
Kiffmeyer. Yeah, call in Stephanie James, please.
Ms. James?
Oh, Madam Chair, I just wanted to clear up that you were working on Senate File 4519, and that's the bill that you've just sent on, as opposed to 4130.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. James. I read the line above and it is Senate File 4519 as amended. That was the roll call. Thank you very much, Mr. Carlson and Ms. James, for clearing that up. So members, again, we are in the last days of session. Please stay tuned. I don't necessarily anticipate anything in the future, trying to respect your time and the times of the whole Senate and get things done as efficiently as we can during these last days. But do stay tuned. And members, with that, we are adjourned.